Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council's online briefing for faith leaders. Today's program shines a light on the Prosecutors Alliance of California's PAC, Survivor Listening Sessions for Victims of Violent Crimes. A special thanks. The San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefings are supported by a grant from MetaFund. The important ongoing work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council would not be possible without generous funding from congregations, corporations, faith-based social service agencies, foundations, judicatories, and supporters like you. Help us spread the word. Visit sfinterfaithcouncil.org to learn about SFIC programming and how to become a supporter. Follow SFIC on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to SFIC's YouTube channel to watch all of our virtual events. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. To activate closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. San Francisco and surrounding counties are requiring masking in indoor public places for everyone as a precaution against the circulation of COVID-19. This includes settings like houses of worship, grocery or retail stores, theaters, and family entertainment centers. Anyone 12 and older will need to show proof of vaccination to go indoors in some places in San Francisco, like restaurants and bars, gyms and clubs, large indoor events, and any business or event serving food or drinks indoors. To find your vaccination record, go to myvaccinerecord.cdph.ca.gov. So get vaccinated, San Francisco. The vaccines are safe and effective. Go to sf.gov/get vaccinated to find a vaccine site in your neighborhood. Now is the time to come together, San Francisco. Together, we can stop Asian discrimination, bias, hate, and violence. The COVID-19 virus has no race or nationality. It is simply a disease. To report a hate crime, call the SFPD at 415-553-1133. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for faith leaders. The Prosecutors Alliance of California Survivor Policy, Training, and Resource Center is dedicated to ensuring safety, justice, and healing for survivors of violent crime. It believes that survivors of crime should be the ones to define the services and resources they need to recover, have options for safety, justice, and healing, and address the root causes of violence in our communities. This week's online briefing for faith leaders, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council, will focus on a particular programmatic effort of the PAC's Survivor Center, its survivor listening sessions. These sessions are designed to hear directly from survivors about their experiences in order to discern what measures could be taken to better focus on their healing and recovery. And as we do now at every briefing, it is my honor and privilege to welcome the founder and past chair of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Rita Semmel.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apology. If we are invited to offer prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better serve understand the multiplicity of our faith traditions in our city and our world. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Rita. And I'm going to quote you now because you've often said to me, one of the things that you love about this work, and I love about this work, is that we get to meet the most wonderful people along the way. One of them is going to be offering this morning's reflective moment. Dear friend and colleague, the Minister of Celebration at Glide Memorial Church, Marvin K. White. Marvin, inspire us.
No pressure, Michael. Thank you. Whenever someone in my family has overcome something that seemed otherwise insurmountable, was cured of something that had death as the prognosis, or survived something that no one has ever walked away from, my people say, somebody must have been praying for you. I believe that we are the recipients, the progeny, the beneficiaries, and heirs to a promise, a prayer, a wish, a notion, and a freedom map that our ancestors, 7 generations back perhaps, sent ahead for us today to access, to use today, to enjoy today, and to open today. Our lives, our possibilities of living into the fullness of creation should not be an unopened, cellophaned, and dust-covered gift basket. We are the answer to every prayer sent ahead into the then unknown coming lineages of our blood and claimed ancestors. They knew somehow that we would live into the dream that they had to defer. I'm inviting you today to imagine yourself being the recipient of so many carefully placed natural, intellectual, spiritual, psychic, and psychological gifts. I'm inviting you to imagine yourself the sole beneficiary of systems, political, critical, analytical, scientific, and artistic that was sent ahead as tools for you. And when they did not send tools, when you feel toolless, know that despite the rumors of ruin and oppression and being oppressed, they said 7 generations back, I believe that we will win. I believe that one of us will win. You are that winning hand. You crossed the finish line in record time. This life is you and your ancestors on the medal podium. How did you get here if not for the generations of training and conditioning that it would take to produce finally in your royal line a prophet? What I'm hoping for today, beloved, is that you can surface the practices that teach you how to know, how to lead from, and how to locate the keys that accompany you into this life. I want you to know that you have always had the master key. I want you to know without a doubt there is and has always been an answer waiting for you, a comfort waiting for you, a windfall waiting for you, a justice waiting for you. I want you to know that I know that the tears you cry are not just yours, but for your people tired of being beaten in the same place, in the same way for generations. Know that the restorative justice is for your whole family line. You are the one who lived to understand how to survive the plots against your lives. You are the proof of your family's intelligent design. You are the proof that the plan worked. You are what became of y'all. You are the healing of y'all. And recovery means that you get you back. You, in the shape that you are in, is as far as your family has ever gotten. You, it has all come down to you, all of it. You are the spell, you are the incant, you are the meditation, you are the conjure, you are the mindfulness, you are the root, and you are the prayer. And you are the answer that you have been waiting for. Amen, hallelujah, right on, shalom, salam, namaste, and ashe.
Amen. Thank you, brother. And I'm going to appropriate the theme of your reflection because I believe that today's program is in a profound way the answer to a prayer. It's interesting. When we plan these sessions, there are certain folks who request to be on our briefings. There are certain moments in time where I'll open the newspaper and I'll say, this is momentous, and we'll contact our partners at DPH. You and I all have full inboxes. For some strange reason, I received from Gina Castro Rodriguez an email that just struck me, and I had to stop for a moment, and I picked up the phone and I made a cold call and asked if she and Lisa would be amenable to presenting, because I felt that the theme of the day was that important. We have two amazing presenters today in Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez, the director of the Survivor Policy Training and Resource Center for the Prosecutors Alliance, especially because she is a professor at University of San Francisco, which is one of our great partners and constituents. And also Lisa Ortiz, Director of Victim Services and Policy and Community Engagement in the Office of District Attorney Chesa Boudin, who Chesa has engaged our council on so many issues. And so we're grateful for this support as well, Lisa. I am going to turn the floor over to the two of you because there's much to be learned today. And hopefully, I gave you permission to be shameless in your presentations, because there might be some people listening here who know people who are survivors who would benefit from what it is you have to say. And so hopefully this will inspire people to come forward in their healing and recovery. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having us here. And thank you so much to the Interfaith Council for convening people and sharing work that's happening out in the community and giving us this opportunity. Really grateful to be here today. So my name is Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez. I play many roles, so I'll just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. I am a professor at the University of San Francisco. I teach in the Graduate Counseling Psychology Department. But I'm also the director of the Prosecutors Alliance Survivor Policy Training and Resource Center. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the intersection of those two roles that I play. Prior to joining the Prosecutors Alliance, I was the Chief of Victim Services in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office for 7 years. I worked with both DAs Gascon and DA Boudin, and really had the opportunity to take a deep dive in understanding how the criminal justice system engages with survivors of violent crime. The good news is there are amazing resources out there, and Lisa and others will talk today about all the great work to support survivors. The bad news is that we are mostly failing survivors of violent crime. Our criminal justice system has not focused on healing and recovery. It has focused on punishment and the side of the system that addresses the harm that has been caused, but doesn't help to heal the harm that has been caused. So the Prosecutors Alliance of California is an organization of reform-minded prosecutors across California who come together to think about how to reform the system for people who have caused harm and those who have been harmed. Their work includes legislation and policy reform, creating resources and programs. And my work with the Survivor Resource Center is really to focus on survivors. How can we do better? How can we focus on healing and recovery? And how can we address root causes of violence by doing that? How can we end the perpetuation of violence in our communities, particularly for those that are most harmed by violence and most affected in their families, in their neighborhoods, in their communities? Like I said, we have not done a very good job, but we are working very hard to correct that. Right now, one of the things that we're doing at the Survivor Resource Center is trying to hear directly from survivors. People have different experiences with trauma, with violence, with crime. Sometimes we have a lot of internal resources and external resources. And even when really bad things happen to us, we pull on all of those supports and we're able to survive it. That's amazing. And that's wonderful for people who have that resource. But there are a lot of people in our communities that are already struggling, that are already surviving day to day, that are already under-resourced in many areas. And unfortunately, when violent crime affects them, they don't get better, they get worse. And those are the communities that we really have not heard from. Those are the communities that don't report things that happen to them, that don't come forward and speak with law enforcement, that don't feel like they will be protected by law enforcement, and that unfortunately don't recover and their lives get a little bit worse. That's what I'm really trying to focus on right now with the work that I'm doing. One of the ways we're doing that is to create different mechanisms for getting survivor voices. So last year, under the district attorney's office in San Francisco, we did a large survey. 535 people responded, and we got an overview or a glance at what people needed, what happened when they reported a crime or didn't report a crime, what services were offered or not offered, how the crime is still affecting their lives. Sadly, we found that many people did not get the resources that they needed. Many people didn't know about their rights or services or have access to those. And a lot of people are still struggling with the effects of their crime years and decades later. That tells us that we need to do better. Because when people are still vulnerable and affected by the trauma and the crisis and the abuse that happens around them, they not only are at risk for future victimization, they are at risk for harming other people out of that trauma. So that makes us all unsafe. And really what we need to do is to intervene, address that trauma, help people get better, and go back to a life where they are safe, where they are healed, where they are productive. And we're going to do a lot of work to understand how to do that for survivors. So we have been for the last month doing these survivor talking circles or listening sessions. We've been inviting survivors to come meet with us virtually and talk about what happened in their case. What information or resource did they get, and what information and resource did they not get? What did they need? And was that available or was it not available to them? And what would have helped? What would have made them in a position so that they could heal and recover? We've been learning a lot. The biggest takeaway is that we're not doing a great job at all levels. Interactions with law enforcement need work. Interactions with district attorney's offices need work. Access and information about what kind of resources are out there, even the few resources we have, are not being shared with people, particularly people of color, immigrants, the elderly, women and children. Some of the most vulnerable people to being victims of crime are not getting the resources that they need. These stories are invaluable in us learning how to do better. And like I said, our goal is to really reach those who traditionally or normally would not come forward and talk with us. So we're providing our listening services in multiple languages. We do it in Spanish, we do it in Cantonese, we do it in English. We're also using trained investigators and researchers to do this work. At the University of San Francisco in the Graduate Counseling Psychology program, I've been able to recruit student volunteers who are training to be therapists and who have taken courses in trauma and crisis and understand the dynamics of people who've been victims. And they're helping lead these interviews and to talk with survivors about their stories and what has happened to them. And then we're going to take that information and we're going to come up with solid recommendations of what needs to happen right away. So things like policies that need to change in jurisdictions, legislation to help survivors really heal, services that don't exist or are not accessible to people. Maybe they're not provided in different languages or in neighborhoods where people can access them, or maybe there are other barriers that we need to tear down. So this work is really critical in helping people recover. I can't tell you the number of people that I've worked with that had an incident where they were a victim of crime, maybe another incident where they were a victim of crime and loss, and then went on to harm someone else out of that pain because they were not healed. In my own experience, I grew up in a really large family with lots of people as cousins and uncles and aunts, and so many people in my family were lost to violence, both causing harm and being harmed, and sometimes both and back and forth. This is an epidemic. And the good news is it's something we can do something about. Trauma can be treated. People can be healed. Things can get better. But we can't do it if we don't know what the need is. And we can't do it if we don't direct the right people and the right resources to the problem. That's our goal here at the Survivor Resource Center, is to really look broadly at what's going on for survivors. What do they need? How do we get for them? And how do we reform the criminal justice system for those who have caused harm, but also for those who have been harmed? Both of those things have to happen in order for us to get to a place one day where incarceration is not the only answer to justice. It's not the only answer to healing. And it's not the only way we keep our society safe. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We're going to share information about the survivor listening circles. We're moving on in October to one-on-one interviews with survivors. Really want to hear from survivors in a more intimate setting about how their crime, the violence against them, harmed them, and how we can address that in the future for other survivors, and even how can we support them now in recovering from their trauma. Thank you very much. I'll pass to Lisa. And since I was in that role for 7 years, don't mind me if I jump in a little bit on your presentation, Lisa.
Thank you, Gina. Really appreciate that. I just really want to begin by thanking Michael for inviting me to be a part of this really important conversation that we're having this morning. And I'm much honored to speak alongside Dr. Gina Castro-Rodriguez, Maddie Scott, and Tony Ibby. They are incredible leaders who advocate fearlessly every day for the voices of victims and survivors in our San Francisco community, as well as throughout the state of California and the nation. My role in the district attorney's office is centered on bringing awareness and outreach to community members about services and resources available to help ensure their safety, their healing, and justice. My presentation will highlight the work that we have done in our victim services that we provide to our victims of crime within the San Francisco community. So with that, I will ask Trey to place up my presentation. And next slide. I'm going to begin with highlighting the work that we've done and just kind of what is victim services, what services do we provide to the community, and other great work that we have done. And so just giving the overview of our victim services, it's really focused on trauma responsive. And the mission of our victim service division is to help victims of crime mitigate their trauma, navigate the criminal justice so that they could rebuild their lives and return back into their community healed. And we do that by having, our division is broken up into 4 buckets, as you could see. We have our advocacy, our compensation, our restitution, and our community outreach and engagement. Next slide. And just to kind of give you a peek into the work that we have accomplished, and during COVID, when our entire staff was working remotely, and I'll have to say, really proud of the team of the work that they have accomplished. We served over 88,000 victims of violent crime, and perhaps a little bit more than that, because we also provided charged and uncharged cases. 824 claims for our victim of crime compensation was processed, and over 1.1 million in victim of crime compensation was paid out to victims of a violent crime. And in the space that we were in during COVID, we had to become really creative in doing our outreach and really bringing awareness out into the community to really inform the community that we were there for them if they needed services. And so we did 900 community training and presentations provided to the community during our COVID and working remotely from home. Next slide. And so we have a team of 43 staff members, and we are expanding at the moment. Chesa, our district attorney, has done a really great job in advocating and expanding our victim services. 25% of our staff were interns before joining the Victim Service Division, and 62.8 identify as crime survivors. And as you could see, our advocates, our team is diverse. We represent the city and county of San Francisco, and that is very important to us because we want to make sure that we identify and connect with our victims and our survivors. Our advocates are multilingual. They speak 11 languages. We speak Cantonese, Spanish, American Sign Language. We also speak Vietnamese and quite a few other languages, Urdu, Tagalog. And we really want to make sure that we connect with victims and survivors and make that connection with the language that they speak. So it's really important for us to have that very diverse group of advocates who speak multiple languages. Next slide. And so just to kind of give you an insight of how our unit is formed, and we have units that are very similar to our assistant district attorney units. As you could see, we have our advocacy, and we have under our general units, you could see it's intake where all our cases come through. They come through our San Francisco Police Department, our CHP, they come through community-based organizations within the community, our partners. We have walk-ins. We also have ADAs that are referring cases over to us. And then depending on what type of case it is, the case is assessed, the victim, and then they're assigned to an advocate in one of these units here. And all of the units here that we see in front of us, we provide crisis support services and counseling, guidance to navigate the criminal justice system, referrals to local resources and services within the community. We also assist in preparing a victim impact statement for the sentencing phase, and we will go into that more with our Marcy's rights for our victims. And we also provide crime prevention information. We provide services with one of our partners, CROC, which is in the community, who provides temporary restraining order assistance. We provide restitution for our victims and advocates. We have a restitution advocate who is specialized in restitution. We have emergency assisting fund, which is an additional fund in the victim services where we provide for expenses that are not covered by our CalVCB program. And those are funds that are paid for such things as funeral, burial that are denied by the CalVCB. We also provide for emergency housing, rental assistance, emergency hotels, gift cards, and groceries. And so that kind of gives you a snapshot of all the services that we do and how it's broken down into our units. Next slide. And so I really want to emphasize on Marcy's rights, and I'm going to have Trey share a video with us, because I do find when I'm out there engaging with the community that many of our victims and survivors are not even aware that they have Marcy's rights. And I want to share this video that comes in multiple languages, and we also will share throughout the media networks that Michael plans to share. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the video.
Many San Franciscans have been the victims of crime, but there's hope and there's help. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. You may not know, crime victims have rights. Crime survivors have rights. The right to be heard, the right to be notified, the right to be informed of your rights. At the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, our victim advocates can help you, even if you don't file a police report or the case isn't charged. Victim advocates are here for you. Marcy's Law in California is a victim's bill of rights. You have the right to be heard. We can help you write your statement for the court, how you feel, the impact of the crime on your life and your loved ones. The court will listen to you at public proceedings, for sentencing, for potential release, or a plea bargain. Another is the right to notification. You can be notified about the custody status of the accused. VineLink provides information about the custody of the accused. You can apply for victims' compensation too. It's National Crime Victims' Rights Week. You're not alone. Together, we can do so much. We're here for crime victims and survivors. Our victim advocates are ready to help. We're here to support you after the crime. If charges are filed, at the hearing, during the trial, and at sentencing, even afterward for further information and services. We have resources for you. Please learn more. Contact the District Attorney's Office for information, for help at our website, by email, or just give us a call. Together, we can do so much.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you. And I really want to emphasize the importance of our Marcy's rights. It is law, and our advocates do a phenomenal job in just navigating our victims through the criminal justice system, advising them of their court hearings. And also, there are 17 rights in the judicial system. And we also provide those Marcy rights, and we also provide support to those Marcy rights. If victims, we inform them of their court hearings, and also if they would request for translations, we provide that for them as well. Next slide. And also just want to add, the video is also available in English, Spanish, and Cantonese. And I provided all three of those links to Michael. Next slide. And just want to talk a little bit about our collaboration with outside agencies within San Francisco and even beyond. But we do work really closely with law enforcement, our Special Victims Unit, which I've indicated before. And I think during COVID, it was when we had to become really creative in developing relationships and providing support to our victims and our services. And we did have a partnership with Veritas, who is a San Francisco real estate management company who donated 20 apartment units for temporary housing used by our survivors as part of our safe house to provide those. We were finding that domestic violence was not being reported, but there was definitely a rise in domestic violence. And so that partnership was really vital during the COVID time. We also partnered with Lyft, provided community agencies with free rides for victims and survivors to transfer them to emergency shelter and safe housing. And so those are the type of partnerships that we have provided, and we continue to provide, such as our caregivers, our nursing home facilities for our elders, and then also for our child advocacy center for child assault and sexual assault type of cases. Next slide. And we also have our partnerships, I want to say, with community-based organizations like our Interfaith, SF Interfaith, with Maddie and her group, along with Tony and her group, and they'll talk more about that in a moment. One of the other services that we provide is the California Victim Compensation Board is mandated by the state, but we do have a small claim specialist, but a very mighty specialist, a mighty team that really work closely with the advocate and the victim in filling out the paperwork. And this is a reimbursement to qualify for expenses incurred as the result of the crime, which are not reimbursed by other sources. It's a payer of last resort, meaning that if the victim does not have insurance, then we will begin the process of filling out the paperwork for our victims to make sure that they get the services that they need to address the harm that was done to them, such as medical, dental, funeral and burial expenses, and relocation security, home security, along with removal of tattoos. And there's all sorts of additional services that are provided to them. Next slide. And just want to say, in each case, there's $70,000 per case. That is the maximum compensation. And so wanted to go on with our restitution unit. We do have a specialized restitution advocate who really advocates for the victim in trying to compensate for the harm that was done to them as well. And the court can order a defendant to pay restitution to the victim, and the victim can request that. And if so, we go for items such as medical expenses, mental health, counseling, wages, if lost wages. And we have an incredible advocate who really works hard every day in trying to replenish and meet those restitution expenses for our victims and survivors. Next slide. And just kind of want to give an overview that we do provide, we work with our partner in the community, who is the Cooperative Restraining Order Clinic, CROC, who provides restraining order assistance to domestic violence, elders, and all of our cases, and assistance with civil restraining orders and the process. It could be very cumbersome. And so we have that really great connection with our community-based organization to help them. They have a team of legal attorneys that really help our victims in helping them with not just the restraining orders, but also with safety planning as well. Next slide. And so here is our contact information for our Victim Services Division. And if, you know, we always are willing to have victims and survivors who perhaps have not been victims and survivors of a violent crime who have not seeked out services. And so please feel free to reach out, and we will do whatever we can to provide services and an assessment of the case and to move forward. We do oversee cases that are charged and uncharged cases as well. Next slide. And I really want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think one of the things that Gina had said to me early on in my career as a victim advocate is untreated trauma is a public safety issue. And that statement it just really drives me to do the work that I'm doing here, because there is so much work that we need to do. You know, we've highlighted the great things we've done that we continue to do in our victim services, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. And just thank you, each and every one of you. And I want to be able to give an opportunity for Maddie and Ibby to share the great work that they do as well.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you so much, Gina. Before we move on to our amazing panelists, just two quick questions, okay? One came from the floor and one I'm going to ask. One is, how are you funded? And then the second question is, because when we started this series of briefings, it was all about COVID. Now, I know that isolation has really exacerbated domestic violence. I'm just wondering what the impact of COVID has had on your work, you know, in general, but also how have you been funded?
I can start. The Prosecutors Alliance is funded through private foundations, and my piece of the work is funded by, I believe we're funded by private foundations for my piece of the work. There's also some political work that happens with the Prosecutors Alliance, but my piece is private foundations. And then the District Attorney's Office, I don't know if you want me to answer that, Lisa?
Sure, Gina, I think you did a lot of work behind that. That would be great.
The District Attorney's Office in San Francisco is funded primarily by grants that come from the federal government through the state, the California Office of Emergency Services. It might be interesting for you to know that the city of San Francisco does not contribute to victim services in San Francisco. It's the job of the office to raise all of those funds on their own. When I was in that role, I spent a lot of time fundraising and bringing in resources in order to serve survivors in San Francisco. DA Boudin has secured some city resources now. That's the expansion that Lisa's talking about. This is really an issue that we all need to be invested in. And so work is being done now to expand that funding and the access to resources in San Francisco.
Just want to add, and our team, the majority of our team salaries are on grants. I think there's only a few of us that receive our funding or our salary through the general fund. So it's always a fight for us to get funding for our victim service division, so that we can provide the services and the resources for our victims. But it's always an ask.
And the impact of COVID?
You know, for me, working with survivors, I just see a lot more isolation, even less reaching out for support and services, more people sort of enduring the effects of their trauma without being able to have connection, which is really important to help heal trauma. So we definitely see it's been exacerbated, and trying to even get people together in person to talk with them or to hear their story. We're not able to do that yet. So everything is still virtual, which limits who we're going to get access to, right? It limits who's able to reach out to us and tell their story. So looking forward to continuing this work over time, but starting where we are because it's critical to get going now.
Okay, we had one clarifying question too. Acronyms I've always struggled with, but we have two acronyms that they're asking for: API and AFAM.
Asian Pacific Islanders.
Right. Okay, there's one. And there was AFAM.
African American.
That sounds just about right. Okay, so I hope that the person who asked the question feels that they've learned something today, and I have as well. Okay, so now we are going to move over to our amazing community panelists. Our first panelist is Toni Eby. She is the executive director of San Francisco Safe House. For those of you in the religious community who know our dear and beloved Glenda Hope, she was the founder of this. It's an amazing program that I will let Toni describe to you, but it's one that the San Francisco Interfaith Council wholeheartedly supports and is very grateful for. Toni, would you start us off?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you everyone for having me here this morning. I hope you all are having a good morning. I really appreciated your presentation, Gina. We always like to hear about survivor listening sessions and how survivors are contributing to policy and to community organizations. As Michael mentioned, we were founded by the Reverend Glenda Hope and Sister Rosina Conrado of the Sisters of the Presentation, so two amazing women of faith. San Francisco Safe House is survivor-led, survivor-informed, and survivor-centered. And when we say survivor-centered, what we mean by that is that we know that the survivor is the best expert in their life. They know what they need. They just need the resources and support to get there. When we're talking about Safe House, and I hear this, there's a lot of misconceptions around who we're serving. So I just want to be really clear. About 83% in 2020 of the women we served were women of color. The vast majority of which, I think it was like 38% of those 83% were African-American women. So we're serving women who do not have housing and are survivors of sexual exploitation or human trafficking. A large percentage of those, I think it was 46%, identified as having more than one disability. Also, about 30% were members of the LGBTQ community. So we are serving some of the most vulnerable citizens in San Francisco. And we get asked a lot, are you a housing agency or are you a service provider? And the simple answer is we are both. You cannot provide services to survivors if they do not have housing, period. Like, it's really hard to start the healing process if you do not have a roof over our head. So we have 3 programs. We have the transitional housing program, which we have had for 23 years. It's our flagship program. It is an 18 to 24 month program. It has 10 beds right now, but we are remodeling it to add 12. We provide intensive case management, therapy support groups, also education and workforce development there. We also, it becomes really hard when you're working in this environment and you're getting calls constantly. Your wait list is over 50 folks long. You get a call and somebody is in a horrific situation and you have to tell them, I don't have space for you. So in 2019, we opened the Hope Center with the partnership with the District Attorney Victim Services Division. Thanks to Gina, she raised more money than she needed that year and was able to help support some community-based organizations such as ours. And this was a really amazing program. It is a drop-in center. It has case management, and we were able to get some housing subsidies from the California Office of Emergency Services. But we were also able to, in 2020, to start a new program. Our scatter site transitional housing or rapid rehousing program was started due to a grant from the San Francisco Presbytery Fund Your Vision campaign. So we received $56,000 to start housing people throughout the city for 1 year and providing them services at the Hope Center. So we pay their rent, we help them find a place to live, and then we provide all the services at the Hope Center. Thanks to that initial start, we were able to go back to the Board of Supervisors, talk about our success in this program, talk about how much this worked. And this year, the Board of Supervisors allocated $260,000 to that program. So that is a huge step. It cost about $18,000 a year on the low end. And we do have some amazing case managers that are out there doing finding cheap, affordable housing, but on the low end, about $18,000 a year to house somebody for a year. So that money will go to about 14 survivors, getting them into housing for a year. And we're also looking to expand that to 2 years. I think we talk a lot about healing. Healing is a process. A year goes by really fast. We want to support people in workforce development on top of making sure that they have the therapy and support they needed to heal. So this year in COVID, we also ran a shelter-in-place hotel for the city and county of San Francisco. And we were the only SIP hotel that had 20 beds allocated specifically for homeless survivors of violence. So we were really proud of that program. It is closing next week as the city, houses and moves people out of the shelter-in-place hotels. San Francisco Safe House is looking to the future. We hope by 2025 to have a new program. And right now we are in the process of holding stakeholder groups. So we want to talk to our survivors. We want to talk to the community. We want to talk to the Victim Services Division. We want to talk to our, partners in the community, such as Asian Women's Shelter, La Casa de las Madres. We want to talk to all the groups and figure out what the most appropriate next program is. So either we're thinking our choices right now are a 90-day human trafficking shelter. There's not a shelter specifically for survivors of human trafficking in San Francisco, an additional transitional house, or permanent supportive housing. So we are doing the research right now, and hopefully by 2025, we will be ready to go. So thank you all so much for letting me share what San Francisco Safe House is doing.
Thank you so much, Tony. I did have a question from the floor for all of you, and that is this San Francisco centric, or can other counties access these services? So very quickly before we get on to Maddie.
So that's a really good question. It really depends on the funding. So anytime that we're getting city funding or from the city and county of San Francisco, the survivors have to at least be homeless 1 day in the city and county of San Francisco. The money from the California Office of Emergency Services, we can serve anybody in California. So it really depends on what part of money we're accessing. But if a survivor comes to us, we work really hard to figure out how to make sure that their services are coming out of that pot.
And Gina and Lisa, did you just want to chime in from your perspective?
Sure. For our Victim Service Division, the crime has to occur here in the city and county of San Francisco for us to provide services and resources to our victims and survivors.
And for the work that we're doing with the Prosecutors Alliance, it's across California. So we're working with survivors all across the state.
Thank you very much. And now it gives me an incredible, humbling privilege to introduce Maddie Scott. Maddie is no stranger to this program because she has appeared before. She is one of my sheroes, the founder and executive director of Healing for Our Families and Our Nation, SF Mothers in Charge, chapter leader, and the Brady campaign here in California. She's the president. Maddie, thank you for being with us. I know that you walk the walk because of your own personal experiences, but I'd like to hand the floor over to you. You've heard a lot today. If you could share with us how you're engaging with this particular program to start out with, and then anything else you have to add.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Rita, and the Interfaith Board for all the work that you do and the services that you provide, and for including me on this panel. And thank you, Dr. Castro and Lisa and the San Francisco District Attorney's Office for the work that you're doing. I also want to just put a shout out and thank you to our Vice President, Kamala Harris, who was the first DA in San Francisco over 15 years ago, who was the first DA to open her doors for us, victims of violence, who came to our neighborhood, met with us in our healing circles, heard all the requests and the programs that you heard Lisa mention that the DA now have. Those programs and services was implemented by us mothers, the services that we wanted that was not in place at the time. So I just want to thank her and thank all of the mothers who were impacted by violence. We came up with these ideas and solutions to how to address the issues because no one was listening to us or heard our voices during that time. So I applaud all the work that you all are doing and continuing to do, and for hearing our voices and implementing those services, as well as Lynn Westry and the San Francisco Department of Public Health, who are on the ground every day addressing the concerns and who are at the crime scenes with the parents when these things happen, they're first responders. So to all the first responders out there, thank you so very much. For you who don't know me, 25 years ago this year, I lost my youngest son, George C. Scott. I always show his picture, I always show his face, and it says, every breath is a gift, and every breath is a gift from God. And when I lost my son 25 years ago to gun violence, while he was attending a graduation party in my neighborhood, first time college graduation, which was real huge in my community, still is. An altercation occurred with two young men. He took them outside to try to squash it. He knew them both. They grew up in our community. I knew both their mothers. And it escalated. And the young man that was intoxicated and had been drinking had a weapon on him. And he pulled that weapon. And my son received 6 bullets and died immediately on the scene. That was July 17, 1996. He was number 56 of 96 homicides in San Francisco that year. The very next day, July 18, was his son, my 5-year-old son, Gabriel. That was his 6th birthday. And I had to be the bearer of bad news to my grandson that his father had died. And that I couldn't tell him that he had been shot. I just told him his dad died, and I tell you, the scream I heard on that phone from my grandson, that scream wakes me up every day to do this work, legislatively, helping victims, helping survivors, working with law enforcement, working with our Congress leader Pelosi and our Mayor Breed, and everyone to address the issues of gun violence across this nation. So that is my work. I'm very passionate about it, and I believe that it's about all of us and none of us. So Healing for Our Families and Our Nation is an organization of violence prevention, intervention, and educational awareness, where we teach healing, health, and restoration to our families, to those. We teach people how to survive again, how to get up again, because it's hard to get up once this happens to you as a mother, as a brother, as a sister, or as a grandmother. I watched the people in my family all fall with me when this happened to me. So it impacts the whole family. And my heart is heavy right now because Oakland has 100 homicides, and that's 100 mothers that has to go to the cemetery instead of going to a graduation. And so I would like us to just pause for a moment for those families in Oakland and here in San Francisco and all over our country right now with a moment of silence in their memory. Thank you. So the work we do, we're with the families on the onset of violence to forever. Our doors never close for them because we know that once this impacts a family, it's difficult. You need mental health services. You don't trust the community anymore. You don't trust law enforcement. You don't trust anyone. You don't trust anyone, even close friends, and you become isolated. You become addicted to substances to numb the pain. All these things occur to families that are impacted. Your children want to retaliate. You have to worry about them. All these things happen to families that are impacted. Sometimes you don't feel like going to work. Sometimes you don't feel like getting up out of bed. You suffer with depression and mental illness. All these things come upon you at once. After the funeral, when everybody goes away, you don't hear from them anymore. Well, we're there. We're there for the families through the pain, throughout the rest of their lives, to support them in whatever capacity that we can. And we've been successful with that. We've helped families to build relationships with law enforcement. We've helped families to heal with their pain and get the proper health care and mental health services that they need for their trauma. We've helped build relationships with city agencies that our families did not trust, because as I said, when this happened to me 25 years ago, there was no services, there was nothing. And we got together and said, we have to do something. We have to make something happen. And so like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, that's what we did as mothers and fathers in the communities, in our communities of color, particularly the Black community and the Latino community. We came together and started meeting twice a month where we could come together and, talk about our pain, talk about what we're going through. How do we find solutions? What do we do? Made a list for the district attorney's office. We made a list for Vice President Kamala Harris when she was out there at that time. We had a list of things that we wanted done and things that was not being done and services that we wanted. And, as a result of that, you all are doing a great job today, Lisa and Dr. Castro, with the district attorney's office and the services that you provide for San Francisco, because they weren't available 25 years ago. So I thank you for that. And I thank Mayor Bree for keeping the doors open for us and for victims of violent crimes. And this Saturday, as a matter of fact, this Sunday, this weekend is the Congressional National Day of Remembrance for all homicide victims. And we will have a vigil on the steps of City Hall this Sunday, and we invite Oakland, Berkeley, and everyone that's been impacted, affected by senseless violence or lost a loved one to homicide. You're welcome to attend to get the healing that you need and the support that you need. Also, I like to address the Brady, why I love Brady so much and do the work that I do with Brady legislatively, because right now, ghost guns is the leading cause of violence in our nation right now, across our nation. And these are guns that, an emergent and existential problem. They're a threat to law enforcement and to public safety. They're completely untraceable firearms that do not have serial numbers, and the parts for them can be purchased without a Brady background check because they haven't been regulated as firearms. And I want to thank our Supervisor Catherine Stefani, and our board, San Francisco Board of Supervisors, for passing and banning the sales of ghost guns here in San Francisco. And we're hoping that others would do the same. San Diego just did it, and we're spreading the word so that we can get these guns out of our communities. The other thing is that if Black lives really matter right now, I just want to give you some alarming statistics. You know, in America, Black people are 10 times more likely to die from gun violence than white people. Black youth are 14 times more likely than their white counterparts to die from homicide. The gun violence is the leading cause of death of Black youth. On the whole, our gun violence decreases Black Americans' average life expectancy by 4 years. Black men and boys, and this disturbs me because my grandson, who was 5 at the time, is a father now. So Black men from the ages of 15 to 34 comprise 37% of homicides, despite being less than 2% of the population. And nationally, the homicide rate for Black men is 30.7 per 100,000, and for white men, it is 2.4 per 100,000. This disparity is even greater in some states. So we have Healing for Our Families on Nation works with, we're a partnership with Black to the Future here in San Francisco and Westside Community Mental Health under Dr. Marianne Jones, where they provide culturally sensitive mental health services for our families impacted by violence. We need more therapists and more funding for Westside Community Mental Health so they can hire more African-American therapists that can address these issues with those that are impacted in our community by violence. And Black to the Future is a program that we're working with throughout the city to help house families, to help meet their needs, with food, especially now during COVID. The suicide rate has gone up in our communities, unfortunately, due to isolation, due to fear. And we know that the homicide rate has gone up in the Bayview community. So we are working diligently with our families to help reach them. We're providing healing circles online, one-on-one direct services with our clients, getting families out of the house safely, making sure they get vaccinated, making sure that they practice social distances and that they're equipped with things to do that help them mentally and physically and spiritually while at home with their children. Those are the things that we do. We nurture our families, and we provide housing where housing is needed, emergency housing. And as I said, we're with those families from the onset of violence all the way to the present. And I'm very proud to be the chapter leader also of Mothers in Charge, which is a nationwide movement of mothers, aunts, grandmothers, and women who family have been impacted by violence as well, under the leadership of Dr. Dorothy Johnson Spite. You can go to mothersincharge.org to look at the work that we're doing. You can also visit Brady United Against Gun Violence.org to learn the legislations and things that we're moving on for common sense gun laws here in San Francisco and in our state of California. And thank God for Governor Gavin Newsom for helping us pass a lot of these bills that will help to save lives and help bring more services that is needed for victims of violent crime.
Thank you, Maddie, so much. And thank you, for sharing with us your personal story, but also your work. This brings us to the end of our program and our time today. I want to thank all of the presenters for their comprehensive, informative, and moving presentations. Would invite you all to join us next Thursday, September 30th at 8:30 a.m. when we welcome the new director of the Department of Disabilities and Aging Services, Kelly Dearman, to talk to us about her vision for that department moving forward, and especially care and resources available to people with disabilities and aging adults. Again, that brings to a close our program today. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you and God keep you.